Hello and welcome to another podcast, another video, listeners and viewers alike of Along the Watchtower. I am LM Walker, your host. This is a podcast where I basically just kind of talk your ear off and just express my burning desires and viewpoints, and hopefully elicit some sort of thoughts and emotions within you that allows you to go on and carry forth the conversation in your world and in your life, in your realm. Been doing some things differently. So the show used to be daily, and it kind of took a hiatus, and now it's becoming like bi-daily-ish, every other day. I'm trying to find a format that fits with me and in my life and in my realm. There's a lot of things going on. However, today is April 1st, the Fool's Day. God, the first thought in my head was like, why do they call it April Fool's Day? What's the story there? For another podcast. It is Thursday, April 1st, 2021. I have been off the grid for the last few weeks. Like I've mentioned before, there's just been a lot of things going on in my personal life, a lot of changes coming up in the spring and the summer, and I'm noticing, of course, as the weather warms, activity increases, and obviously as we open our society again, activity increases. Of course, we've had 3 mass shootings in the last 3 weeks. We've had these 2 teen girls charged in a carjacking that left an Uber Eats driver dead. I wasn't even not really even going to talk about this, but like I often want to highlight the macabre that's being expressed by our species. Increasingly. So as our technology becomes more sophisticated, our culture is engaging in this regression, and we're wielding the technology as sort of a gap fill, right? A stopgap, a gap fill, a band-aid. We're placating ourselves with it. We're using it as bread and circuses, right? Neo bread and circuses. So while we have all-time highs in the stock market, which is just a consortium of digital ones and zeros, and the sophistication of games, the likes of which has never been seen, and AI robots and flying cars and the Neuralink and this and that, we as a society can't decide how we want to, like what kind of virtues we want our children to have. What kind of morality, like what is intrinsic morality? Like intrinsic morality has been questioned. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I thought we understood that one man's trash is another man's treasure, but there are certain things that are unconscionable, like, harming a child, right? And then you have situations like NAMBLA. First of all, pedophilia is rampant amongst the elite. We all know that. That's not hyperbolized. That's not an exaggeration. But more than that, as far as I know, NAMBLA no longer exists, but it's the National Association of Man-Boy Love. I'm sorry, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. They seem to be. I think they're around. But not only that, they're under the guise of mental health and just the sort of neoliberal postmodern movement of unyielding self-assurity. No matter who or what you are, what you do, live your truth, and that's you, boo-boo. You've had this resurgence of organizations and of concepts like NAMBLA. And I'm not suggesting that things like body acceptance and pedophilia are of the same. That's not what I'm suggesting. However, I've often mentioned that political movements and ideologies are often hijacked, and that's certainly what you have going on and what you've had going on for some time now, where legitimate issues and civil rights arguments are being hijacked by zealots and grifters. That's nothing new. But that being said, I wanted to mention just the confusion, the macabre, the chaos, the live Facebook murders, and Uber Eat murder carjackings, and just the top tier. And then again, this last one I was going to mention the top tier and echelon of our society being nothing but rampant, like rich rich demons engaging in the soul-sucking activities of fucking children and selling them on black markets. But that's nothing new, which is even worse. That makes it even worse. However, again, it is a sad sight to see this sort of, and it's generational. So each generation's sort of concepts and value systems seems to be regressing further and further. And okay, right? So check this. So an interesting correlation. Well, okay, correlation doesn't mean causation, right? Or causation doesn't mean correlation. I forgot which way it goes. Right. Correlation does not imply causation, right? I think there's a correlation between the increasing desperation and so, excuse me. I would like to argue that as, the desperation, as the inequality, whether institutional or otherwise, that's a different topic. Well, not really different, but that's a segue in and of itself. If that it continues to increase, right? If the boot on the neck of the average person continues to increase, coupled with this decoupling of just basic concepts of social progress and what that looks like, and this whole deconstructionist approach to everything, I mean, it seems to only increase the likelihood of, generations of children and young folk and young people, who don't, as each generation kind of untethers itself from the previous generation's adherences wholeheartedly. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. Everything should grow. You shouldn't, stagnate. The only constant in life is change. But the problem is that you have to guide that change somehow, right? There has to be some sort of compass there. And that's how you look backwards to kind of have an idea of where to go, but it doesn't have to determine what you do. Everything is hyperbole. But for me, it was really a red flag with the Facebook Live murders. Yeah. But that's the monologue. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like what I'm doing. I'm always trying to do this better. I got a bit of a new format here today as to how I approach the articles, trying to tighten it up. Yeah. So, all right. To begin, definitely not going to do the teenage girl thing. Dominion. The Dominion voting official in hiding speaks out. This never ends for me. Now, this is another, I don't want to say hit piece, but it's definitely a piece where its bias is written all over it. The whole thing is written from the perspective that any and all, okay, excuse me. Don't mind me. For me, at least, for me personally, I will always be very specific about my issues or my curiosities, there we go, regarding the election, as I continue to bring up, and it's only one example, but I think it exemplifies exactly what some, not all, because some of those representatives, some of the Republicans that were there to challenge the election results, okay, here we go. Some were there. There's grifters, and there are those who were there. Very few that were there with serious concerns that they felt needed to be addressed. Most of them were grifters. Most of them were just trying to latch on to Trump's base, okay, and use that aggravation, that feeling of disenfranchisement to their advantage. But there were some there with legitimate concerns. All right. That being said, right, there were those that felt that the results overall needed to be challenged, and there were some, very few again, that felt that the process the process had flaws, and it was the process that needed to be reviewed, not necessarily wholesale the results. Okay. Now for me, I will always point to Oakland County, Michigan, Fixed computer glitch turns losing Republican into a winner in Oakland County. The TLDR is that this representative here in Oakland County's 15th Commission District, representing Rochester and Rochester Hills, thought he lost. And then he got a call while he was sleeping, and woke him up the next day to them being told, like, oh, hey, by the way, you won, actually. Sorry. And he's like, well, what happened? He's like, well, our Dominion system had a glitch, had an error, whatever have you. Be that as it may, again, it is one example, right? And it should not be looked at, right? It's an outlier, not necessarily the contingent standard. However, it is important that we identify that electronic voting issues have been around since the beginning. Okay, Hacking Democracy, the documentary. It's always 4 documentaries: Manufacturing Consent, Hacking Democracy, American Blackout, and Bernie Blackout. And I feel like there was a 5th one, but those 4. I feel like I'm definitely missing one, but be that as it may. In Hacking Democracy, it was about the electronic voting systems that were used in Bush v. Gore. And so the problems have been around for some time, and they're not going away anytime soon, especially where there's a monopoly on electronic voting systems. As far as I know, Diebold was the company that we used initially. Diebold no longer does it because, they got hammered. But what happens is that articles like these that are really, they're sad, and you empathize with this guy, like, oh man, Trump put him on blast and ruined this guy's life. And Trump's an ass for that, because I'm definitely not a fan of doxing or anything of that of the like, anything in its place. However, the American Services Operations Group did and this is all in Michigan. I just like to be very specific and focus on Michigan. Did a audit of the Dominion systems in Michigan and found that the adjudication log was missing in Michigan. Because all states had to create new laws to incorporate electronic voting. And one of the new things that in Michigan they created was that the adjudication log, if it's missing, then they have to do an investigation as to why. Now, what is the adjudication log? If you haven't caught any of my previous shows, the adjudication log is the log that is used by adjudicators to write down and record who makes what changes, who adjudicates over specific votes. Now, what is voter adjudication? If your vote has coffee on it, if they can't make out your name, if you wrote in your candidate, your selection, and they can't understand it, they have to determine voter intent. So it goes to these adjudicators. These adjudicators, they determine with their, telepathy, I guess, how you wanted to vote, who you are, etc. They try to correct any errors and rectify it to make it valid, to make it, standard. And then it goes into an adjudicated vote box and blah, blah, blah. But that needs to be recorded, like who changed what, how, and when. And that log was missing and is missing. And stuff like that. And for me, I feel like that could have been something very specific that's brought out. But instead you have the League of Grifters, from Giuliani to Sidney Powell, all trying to take advantage of the animosity, the confusion, the chaos. And there was a real opportunity lost to bring in to shine a light really on the vulnerabilities that exist in electronic voting. But I digress. Let's read a little bit here from Yahoo Finance. Dominion voting official in hiding speaks out. This never ends for me. I knew my life would never, ever, ever be the same, said Eric Coomer, 50, in an interview with Yahoo Finance. The director of product strategy and security for Dominion, now on paid leave, Coomer was recalling a nationally televised press conference in mid-November when Trump campaign lawyers Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell denounced him individually by name as having helped rig the 2020 election. And by the way, again, I'm not a fan of doxing. And I'm not a fan of hyperbolized accusations. When you speak and you make a claim, it's not difficult to support your claim with evidence, with data. When you refuse to do that or are reluctant to do that, I, as an individual, an intelligent person, should feel some type of way about that. Like, my reaction to that should be skepticism. But then again, that's actually the defense that we read about, I think, on Tuesday. that Sidney Powell's lawyers are making, like, oh, any reasonably intelligent person wouldn't have da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, well, yeah, unfortunately, in the court of law, when you make a claim, you're innocent until proven guilty. You have to back up the claim that you're making. Anyway, I digress. In the most in-depth print interview he has given since going into hiding that month, Coomer describes below what it was like to be public enemy number one to the conspiracy theorists who falsely blame Trump's election loss on voting machine fraud. By the way, I mean, fraud was happening. See, here's the thing. There is, yeah, and I'll address that in just a second. Coomer's ordeal began November 9th when an obscure podcaster from Castle Pines, Colorado, aired an account of an alleged Antifa conference call that the podcaster claimed to have infiltrated the previous September. The podcaster Joel Altman alleged that a man on the call, who was referred to as Eric the Dominion Guy, boasted of having rigged the election for Joe Biden. Altman accused Coomer of being that Eric and displayed Coomer's photo during the video podcast. Altman has been raging against Coomer ever since. Now, that's not credible. That's not like credible evidence. That's circumstantial at best. 1, 2, actually admitted, at least they wrote, that while making his claim, he referred to him as this person, but didn't seem to didn't conclusively declare that this was the person, Eric, the Dominion guy. And then thirdly, the voter machine fraud, right? Here's the thing. So Rachel Rodriguez, right, which was she was the subject of one of my first podcasts, okay, Project Veritas, God bless their soul. They did an undercover investigation of her, and where she basically laid out the whole thing, like, hey, I'm a mercenary, I'm a political mercenary. I can garner votes for any candidate that's willing to pay for them. I do everything from electioneering to straw voting, where you vote for the person and you bring the votes in, and blah, 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 and to gifting, the whole deal. I'm straight pay for play. She finally got arrested, etc., etc. So it isn't like electioneering, voter fraud, those things weren't happening. I just talked about the official in Oakland County, Michigan, being a loser at night and waking up the next day and being a winner because Dominion systems are fucking up. Now, mind you, Rachel Rodriguez and Dominion systems fucking up, electronic voting and then in-person electioneering and committing voter fraud are two different things. But when you use the term voting machine fraud, you have now conflated the two things. There was fraud going on, and there was voter machine error happening. But voter machine fraud, as in, for example, if Rachel Rodriguez were to purposefully, right, create an error within the machine that would benefit Joe Biden in one way or another, that's voting machine fraud. Fraud is purposeful. Now, there may be errors going on. My whole thing about it is I'm not ready to declare fraud when the machines and the software could simply be functioning erroneously. And I mean, if you're functioning erroneously, then you're not really functioning. Well, no, you can function. You are functioning. You're doing something. You're just fucking doing it wrong. So you are functioning. This is true. It's just not efficient, and in fact, it is in error. Excuse me. But fucking done with this article. But yeah, see, that's the whole thing for me. This is why rhetoric is so important. It's not only what you say, but how you say it. But all right. So you know how I was talking about wealth disparity and the like. I just found this funny. Ackman says capitalism is the most powerful potential source for solving society's problems. The problem with that, one, this is a billionaire, quote unquote, activist investor, Bill Ackman, the CEO of the $13 billion hedge fund, Pershing Square Capital, made a case that capitalism is the most powerful potential. See, the problem is that as a billionaire, I'm not sure that you are in a position to discuss potential solutions to wealth inequality and to like to the wealth disparity of the planet. And that isn't to say that you can't offer solutions. Like, anyone who has an opinion and a solution, by all means, should feel free to express it. However, I feel it disingenuous that a major winner in capitalism, a major capitalist, is like, yeah, go capitalism. Capitalism is here's the thing. Capitalism is great when it works for you. The problem is when it works for you, you have two choices then. To continue letting it work for you and going about your business without undermining other people, or to exponentially increase your gains by undermining other people and allowing yourself free reign over the entirety of what's profitable for you. This is the issue, is that capitalism has been, like any other institution in this country, really on the planet, has been hijacked. It's been hijacked by those who it benefits most, and so it is those who benefit it most who are those who it benefits most, who are of course its largest proponents. So I just feel it disingenuous, and I just wanted to cover that. I always love it when rich people are like, I know the solution for all the wealth inequality. It's like, yeah, so do we. Give up some of your money. Literally, of these $1 billion feeds the world at, I think it's like 1.3 times. That's $1 billion. You got multiple you are a multi-billionaire. There are multiple billionaires. So guess what? Not even just one of you has to do it. You guys can be the Fellowship of Billionaires. The Fellowship of Billionaires comes together, each giving a portion of $1 billion for food, each giving a portion for $1 billion for rebuilt infrastructure. This is not hard for multiple multi-billionaires to do. So for you, as a multi-billionaire, to say capitalism is the solution is disingenuous, because the reality is, through capitalism, you can simply offer up your money, right? All of you could offer up some portion of the monies that you have, a larger portion than you already are, to effective organizations and effective policy making and effective action taking, and then you can wield and I don't want to use the concept of missionaries, but really it's what it is. You must first offer up deliverance before, proselytizing your deity. Like, you must deliver us from what you put us in the first place. This is why you see such a rapid rise in retail investors. It's like, no, you guys hijacked the engine of capitalism for yourself, left us out to dry, and now we're like, now that you're successful from it, you're like, yeah, capitalism is great. What are you talking about? Good God. Oh, and now the Fed goes woke. Fed not at all satisfied with diversity levels within central bank. Again, this does not highlight the issue at hand. If you wanted to talk about wealth inequality, if you wanted to talk about inequality in the central bank, you need to be talking about wealth inequality, not the level the level of racial inequality amongst high level executives, ? Let's read this. Let me just, oh boy. Federal Reserve officials acknowledge that they need to do a better job on recruiting diverse candidates, noting that central bank policy making would benefit from a wider array of perspectives. Just because you're black doesn't mean you care about poor people. God, being wealthy changes you. Well, I mean, being anything changes you, but it's like, the point isn't that like hiring a rich black guy at a central bank is going to help black people. That's not how this works. Oh my God. We're not at all satisfied with where we are, says Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. A New York Times piece noted that the Fed's 870 total PhD economists, only 11 are black. In other words, black voices make up only 1% of an institution's economic team responsible for driving economic policy for a nation that is 13% black. Full stop. 1% of them are black. What are those 1% saying? Are those 1% expressing a populist ideology or populist policy change here? Because I don't think for me it matters that they're black. It matters what they're saying. If they're walking in lockstep with the rest of the white people around them, it doesn't matter then, does it? In the over 100-year history of the Federal Reserve System, none of the system's 12 regional outposts had a black leader until 2017, when Raphael Bostic was named president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. In some degree, it's a byproduct of the structural realities that we have in our society, Bostic said. At the New York Fed, Executive Vice President Beverly Hurrell said the key is improving the pipeline of diverse candidates into the Fed. Hurrell said the bank is engaging with historically black colleges and universities and minority communities to recruit talent. We have been less effective at bringing in unrepresented. Okay, all right. Hurrell said let me just stop. Hurdle said the economics profession also faces challenges in diversity of gender, with women receiving only 35% of PhDs in economics each year. Right? Is that is that due to some sort of hindrance on the part of like the male hierarchy, or is that because of a lack of PhD applicants being female? Hurdle added that the challenge extends beyond how to recruit women, but how to retain them as well. Oh, okay. You're gonna move on. One's Antifa. One's in a militia. How an ancestry match led to an unlikely bond. I found the headline curious. Uh, uh, I'm at, let's just read because instead of me telling my story, I'll just read the article. The Facebook message instantly struck Andrew as suspicious. The note was from a stranger in Virginia named Cody, who claimed to be a distant relative based on the uncommon last name they shared. NBR is withholding it, obviously. Cody's profile picture showed a burly masked man in a militia-style getup with a semi-automatic rifle. He's the, yeah, I was concerned, recalled Andrew, a 31-year-old music producer in Los Angeles. That's probably the nicest way I could say it. Andrew figured it was an identity theft scam, or because the note had arrived during last summer's racial justice protest, maybe a right-wing infiltration attempt related to his work as an organizer with Black Lives Matter groups. I was very hesitant, obviously, but I was also intrigued. I've never met another person with my last name that didn't have a relationship to me. Andrew rarely accepted Cody's offer to trace his genealogy. Cody returned with records showing that they were eighth cousins. The research checked out with Andrew's own. Once he got all the way back to the 1700s, Andrew said, he was convinced that Cody was legit. He wanted to learn more. But there was still that unsettling profile pic. I was like, this guy's a proud boy, and we're related. Yes, exactly. Come from all walks of life. 1 second. Cody, 24, is actually not part of the Violent Proud Boys, but he does belong to a different segment of right-wing extremism. About 2 years ago, he joined the Virginia-based gun group that's aligned with the Three Percenters. Okay, wait. So he joined a group that's aligned with the Three Percenters. I'd like to note that. Also, I'd like to note right-wing extremism. The term, I love the term right-wing. I mean, I hate all these terms. But when the people say right-wing extremism, it's an umbrella for everything from racists to anti-government to anti-vax, the whole deal. So, God. All right, but let's continue. Two members, not Cody, were at the January 6th rally. When the two sought descend into violence, Cody said they booked it and didn't join the mob. You got to be kidding me. Some dude with horns on his head running around. It was ridiculous. Yes, indeed. In Andrew, Cody couldn't have stumbled upon a more different relative. At demonstrations against police violence, Andrew wears the black bloc uniform of militant leftists, along with a gas mask and helmet inscribed with BLM. He's an organizer, a white ally, with black-led activist groups fighting for reparations and the abolition of policing systems. With a laugh, Andrew describes his politics as about as far left as you can get. Andrew and Cody sit on opposite coasts and opposite sides, each representing movements accused by the other of fueling domestic terrorism. It's unlikely they never would have met, much less struck up a dialogue, if it were not their chance connection through a German settler who lived 2 centuries ago. Then they just kind of go into like FBI and right-wing extremism. But I just wanted to highlight that because it really is what we're seeing now is a situation really akin to what we saw in the croppings of the Civil War, where it's, I mean, not that these guys even knew each other and not that they were like tight family members, but there was something that was covered on Rising where a poll found that and it was a complex dissemination, but it found that the majority of people that live in, whether they be urban areas or rural areas, found that only a very small percentage of them live near or next to their politically ideological opposing, those who have politically ideologically opposing concepts. I feel like I'm butchering this. So the one I'm trying to get you is like you often do not find that Democrats live in neighborhoods where there are Republicans. Liberals do not live in neighborhoods where there are not Democrats. It works both ways. And then there's a difference in there. Because it's one thing to be in an area, to like seek out an area that has a particular type of demographic and ideology in it, versus what ends up happening over time and how like something like gentrification changes an area or redistricting changes an area to where it seemingly is only for the most part Republicans or only for the most part liberals. Um, Nonetheless, we still, at the end of the day, are like right next to each other, side by side in the workplace, side by side in the ways that we go on recreation. Like when you go to a beach, you think it's just Republicans on a beach. You think it's just Democrats at the movie theaters. Like that's fucking stupid. So I just wanted to highlight that article. I thought it was interesting, relative to the closeness, despite how divisive everything is and feels. At the end of the day, we are much closer to each other than we realize. Really, at all times. It's fascinating. Yes. All right. Couldn't be a complete show without interruptions and technical difficulties. So yeah, we are going to move on to some COVID news now. Let's see here. Pfizer. Always Pfizer. Pfizer says COVID-19 lasts for 6 months, protects against variants. I'm all about it. Excuse me. Don't get me wrong. My whole thing about it, and I know I've talked about it in previous shows, like, oh, I'm not going to get the vaccine, etc. And, I talk about AEFIs, which are adverse effects from immunization. The World Health Organization has like a little e-learning class that I went on and did and stuff like that, and it's cool. And there's a lot of information there you can learn, and it's useful, and it's good to be aware of what's going on around you and have the full complement of information that is made available, and it should be made available. You're putting something into your body that could alter you permanently, that will alter you permanently. My whole thing about it is I'm merely looking back to the beginning. When I look back to the beginning, the performance of these companies was less than stellar, and sure, we can attribute some of that to the Trump administration, but inevitably these are private corporations that do what they want, as we've seen in the past. Ergo, the opioid crisis and the billions that they had to pay in a settlement that goes under the radar. Like literally, the majority, if not all of these Operation Warp Speed companies, are also the same companies that ended up paying out in this $21 billion lawsuit. That they it was a settlement in which they took guilt, or accepted guilt, or accepted the claim of guilt for the opioid crisis. Pfizer also then went on to go and raise drug prices on multiple drugs of its own. Whatever. Be that as it may, my whole thing is I look towards that time. I look towards the lack of information. I look towards then the flood of information that did not have the greatest outlook, but it was better than nothing. I look towards the AEFIs, and I look towards the investigations that were supposed to be being conducted that now we've heard nothing about. And I simply say, okay, well, what happened to them? I'm not suggesting no one go and get the vaccination, not by any chance. But we do have the reality of our government and our society not being able to, or believing that they cannot function without this vaccine. So, I suggest people do what they think is in their best interest. I wouldn't want anyone to conflate my opinion or my desire for information and to have, the fullest awareness of a situation as I can, with deterring from, protecting yourself. Always protect yourself. Protect yourself. That being said, and I keep peeking over to, I've made a trade. Go Ethereum. But anyway, the COVID-19 vaccine developed by Pfizer and partnering biotechnology company BioNTech has proven highly effective against the coronavirus, including variants, for at least 6 months after full inoculation. Full stop. That means you may have to continuously get this shot. That's something new. I don't think in any of the things that we've read, that it suggested that you needed to have repeated shots. I know that booster shots were mentioned, but wow, so you're telling me that one isn't enough. All right, well, we do what we must. To continue, the two companies announced Thursday that the latest phase of testing, which includes an analysis of 927 confirmed symptomatic cases of COVID-19 and 46,307 trial participants total showed the vaccine to be 91% effective against transmission. That's a large pool. In terms of severe illness and death, the vaccine is 95% and up to 100% effective. Very nice. And also data from more than 12,000 recipients of Pfizer's vaccine demonstrates the shot's safety for a vast majority. This data confirms the favorable efficacy and safety profile of our vaccine and position us to submit a biologics license application to the U.S. FDA. The high vaccine efficacy observed through up to 6 months following a second dose and against the variant prevalent in South Africa provides further confidence. For sure. I am definitely like, wow, okay, that is enormous. That's the type of data dump I'm looking for. 46,000 people in total specifically, which includes 927 confirmed symptomatic cases of COVID. Okay. All right. I could, okay. That is definitely hopeful. At least one COVID shot has been given to 7 in 10 elderly Americans, including my mother. And then it's really important, again, that this also be looked through the prism not only of your own personal protection, but the protection of others. We cannot interact, society cannot function, nothing can happen unless the government basically deems it to be no longer a health issue. And it's just as simple as that. As long as it continues, as long as the possibility of it continuing to be a health issue is an issue or possibility, it's just not going to happen. So we have to put things in perspective for sure. CDC extends eviction ban through June 30th as regulators vow crackdown. Monday's extension makes no substantive changes to the policy, despite housing advocates pushing the administration to boost enforcement measures. It's amazing to me how during a pandemic you still have issues like people, harping on people for money. It's like there's no jobs. We can't, again, society isn't open. Nothing is open. So how is it that I'm supposed to pay you, my good man? The CDC said Monday that the federal eviction moratorium has been extended through June 30th, a good thing, a move that will protect millions of tenants who have struggled to make their rent payments through the coronavirus crisis. Shortly after the CDC announcement, two key financial regulators warned that they will be monitoring and investigating the eviction practices in light of newly extended ban. Pointing, the COVID-19 pandemic has presented a historic threat to the nation's public health, obviously. Keeping people in their homes and out of crowded, congregated settings like homeless shelters by preventing evictions is a key step in helping to stop the spread of COVID-19. What would also help is going forward trying to... No, they're just going to vaccinate everybody and leave the problem of the homeless to the homeless. Never mind, I was going to say, some sort of outreach. Because we have an opportunity here, okay? The politicians aren't the only one that see the fact that there's an opportunity to seize the momentum of and need. So the need and desire of change is a momentum that can be used politically to garner societal changes that are permanent and lasting, okay? So the reality of the matter is that, it'd be great to have some sort of renaissance in the way we think about and the way we think towards homeless outreach and trying to prevent utter destitution in people and in their lives. But that's not going to happen. They're just going to encourage us, as always, because it's like Joe Biden campaigned on is getting back to things as usual. And things as usual, things usually are just stagnant, sadly. But it's good that at least we have an extension until June. I'm not sure how helpful that's going to be. Well, anything helps. It all helps. But the reality of the matter is that we will still be in recovery in June. And that people who have lost their job and have lost everything probably still won't have a job in June, right? And will probably still need help in June. June is too soon. No rhyme intended. The CDC initially released an order in September barring eviction for non-payment of rent through the end of 2020, citing a 1944 public health law. Congress extended it in December, and they renewed it. Biden administration renewed it again through March 31st. Congress also has enacted more than $45 billion in rental assistance to help distressed tenants pay back rent and ensure the struggling landlords are able to pay mortgage payments. But little of that money has actually been distributed. The eviction ban requires tenants to state that they have been financially affected by COVID-19 and can no longer pay rent. Evictions for other reasons are still permitted. I mean, what other reason is really worthwhile at that point, honestly? All right. So, continuing. Consumers filed 106 injury claims from COVID-19 vaccines, ventilators, and hydroxychloroquine. Here's why none have been paid. A federal program charged with compensating people for serious side effects from COVID-19 drugs and vaccines did not pay or reject any claims during the first year of the pandemic. The 106 injury claims for vaccines, hydroxychloroquine, and other COVID-19 treatments remain under medical review as of March 15th. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Health Resources and Services Administration, the agency within HHS that runs the Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program, provided data to USA Today showing injury claims for 20 types of COVID-19 treatments. More than half the claims alleged injury from COVID-19 immunizations, but with just 58 claims out of more than 120 million doses administered by mid-March, experts say the data adds to growing evidence of COVID-19's vaccine safety. The next most common type of claim with 15 cases alleged ventilator injuries, etc. It's unfortunate the way that they're approaching this is to kind of attack people who are seeking compensation. Almost, it's like, well, you see the percentage is so minuscule that it is indicative of the safety of the vaccine. Well, yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there shouldn't be compensated. If there was an injury from an MMR shot, I mean, I believe there's compensation for that. Something happens, but the White House knew more than a week ago of Johnson & Johnson contractor vaccine supply problems. Workers at Emergent Biosolutions ruined 15 million doses by mixing ingredients from two COVID-19 vaccines together. I honestly hadn't even heard of this. I am a bit unfamiliar. This sounds horrific. Senior Biden administration health officials, including some within the White House, knew 2 weeks ago that Johnson & Johnson contractors' production problems could delay delivery of a significant number of future vaccine doses. According to three senior administration officials. The news that the contractor, Emergent Biosolutions, had ruined 15 million doses of J&J vaccine by mistakenly mixing it with ingredients from another coronavirus shot became public on Wednesday. But two senior officials working on the federal government's COVID-19 response told Politico that it became clear earlier this month that there were significant problems at the plant where the company was producing the active ingredient or drug substance for the vaccine. The officials say they had not known the exact details of the situation. A third senior official said the Department of Health and Human Services found out last week that Emergent had botched 15 million doses and how. It was no secret that Emergent did not have a deep bench of pharmaceutical manufacturing experts. The federal government expects that Emergent's problems will delay future shipments of the vaccine, and distribution of doses to states will be patchy during the next several weeks. One of those officials said that Johnson & Johnson should still be able to deliver the doses it promised under its contract with the government by the end of April. The company, which barely met its goal of shipping out 20 million doses by the end of March, has promised the government 100 million doses by the end of May. Yeah, good luck. It just reminds me of the person who purposefully ruined those vaccines. Human error is all over this. And I'm just thinking to myself, in the research that I've done in previous vaccine campaigns, I'm sure it has happened, but it just seems like all of this, and I mean, it's rushed for a reason, but then the reason, it's like, well, is the reason because of the health emergency, or is the reason because of the ill functionality of the economy and thus our society without the government without everything being open, right? Is society not open means society doesn't function. Or is it the health crisis, which, is an issue onto itself? Um, I don't jump for anybody. I'm not one to, oh my God, of course it's about health. It's like, well, okay, let's put it into perspective, because technically the death rate is comparable to influenza. However, it's affecting a certain demographic, a certain populace of our population more than normal. I understand that. Even still, the flu, old people getting the flu, people having pre-existing health conditions getting the flu is still a major thing, because, having any sort of compromised immune system, or, in the case of the upper respiratory infections, a respiratory system, you got collapsed lung before, you're a smoker, etc., you have asthma. Those things, it's always an issue of concern for those people when they get sick. They get pneumonia, etc. They get infections of any kind. However, the question we have to ask ourselves is, does that, yes, a novel virus does increase the danger, the level of danger. Obviously, it's novel, it's new. However, does that warrant an entire shutdown in the way that we've seen, especially given and here's the thing, it's like, all right, well, you have certain communities that didn't even obey the lockdowns. You have certain states that didn't obey the lockdowns. It's like, it's difficult to point at one thing, suggest that doing or not doing one thing or another could have a said effect or another, when the thing that was done wasn't even done effectively in the first place. Like, we don't have a baseline to come from to judge other possibilities. But I digress. I'm just saying, like, I'm not one to, like, oh my God, I didn't point at something. It's like, yeah, it's got to be this. And then it's like, no, I'm not, I'm not the Vatican. I cannot tell you. I do not proselytize, or I try not to. I'm not declarative to that extreme. However, sentiment is changing towards the vaccine. Growing share of Americans say they plan to get a COVID-19 vaccine or already have. 77% think vaccinations will benefit the economy. Pew Research reads, more than a year after the virus arrived, there are signs of the growing public dissatisfaction with the country's response. Performance ratings for how top health and state and local officials have responded to the outbreak continue to decline. And there's less consensus than there was at the start of the outbreak about whether certain steps like restrictions or restaurants are even necessary. Still, at the outset of President Biden's term, there is more optimism than pessimism that the policies of his administration will improve the country's response to the outbreak. There's also a shared sense that the vaccination efforts will play some role in improving the economy, a top priority. So, half of the Americans intend to get the vaccine, and 19% already have. If you recall, we were reading numbers, saying like, 33% of first responders, or 40-something% of first responders said they wouldn't get it, and like 30-something% of Americans, blah, blah, blah. Sentiment is seriously changing, and I always will ask questions. It's like, well, is part of that because of the stressors of not having an open economy? Because the government is by de facto basically requiring us to have it, or sentiment changing because of data that I just read about that is pretty damning towards those who have concerns. Like, you should always have concern for putting things into your body. However, those concerns need to be grounded in realism, and it's like, okay, so if you have bad facial fillers, you should seek physicians' advice. You should point out the articles that talk about facial fillers and the reaction that it has. If you have blood thinner, we read about the blood thinner medication. If you take blood thinners, it's very simple. You just go down the line. Okay, well, what have I read? I read about facial fillers. I read about blood thinners. I feel like those are the main ones thus far. And there was no, never mind. That's related to the blood thinner. But yeah, if you had facial fillers, which millions of Americans have, and millions of Americans do take blood thinners, so that is I don't want to say quasi serious. It is a pretty serious thing. But it's like, be reasonable. Be fucking reasonable. I'm trying to be reasonable. I'm trying to be optimistic, constructive, and reasonable. Like, okay, now I have to consider, like, maybe I should get the shot. That's pretty, I'm liking the stats I'm seeing so far, and it's been about 6 months, right? Or it's been it got in November, December, January, February, March, 5 or 6 months, right? Me and the other skepto gang, we've been saying like, yeah, let's wait about 6 months to a year. We're seeing good numbers. I'm liking what I'm seeing. So, and it's coming. The de facto demand for the shot is coming, right? And what do I mean by that? I mean, we were reading about the New York New York City restaurant that fired its employee for refusing to get the shot. We, we've been reading about vaccine passports. We know that the question is being posited in Congress. We know that folks have been talking about it. Like, what would you? And it's a fun hypothetical. Like, would you go to your favorite concert? Would you go to Lucidity if they said that you couldn't be there? Would you go to Lucidity if the vaccine was mandatory to go? Would you go see your favorite concert, et cetera, et cetera? And it's like, at the end of the day, I think the majority of people would. I think the majority of people would say, yeah, you know what? Especially as time goes on and you're reading less and less about any issues that may or may not have happened or will occur, and you just hear more good news. You're definitely going to see that reluctance pull back for sure. But coming to the end of the show, let's finish this up real quick. Overall, 19% of adults say they have already received at least one dose of the vaccine. Another 50% say they definitely or probably plan to get vaccinated. Taken together, 69% of the public intends to get the vaccine or already has, up significantly from 60% who said they plan to get the vaccine in November. That was right, 30-something percent were skeptical, 60% were going to get it, and then there was an in-between. Differences across demographic and political groups continue to characterize public views of COVID-19 vaccines, yet these dynamics are fluid, and there have been some notable changes as intent has risen and vaccines have become more widely available. A majority of black Americans, 61%, now say they plan to get the vaccine or already received it, sharply up 42 from who said that they were going to get vaccinated in November. Differences in intent to be vaccinated among black, white, Hispanic, or Asian adults are generally smaller now that they were 3 months ago. Proof is in the pudding. Time. That's all I was saying in the beginning. Just let's see. Let's see how this plays out. Are we going to see more incidents crop up, or what's going to happen? And now people are starting to see. It's like, yeah, you know what? It's looking like this probably should do this. Among older adults who are at greater risk of serious case of the disease and have priority access, 41% say they have already received at least one dose. Another 44% say they definitely or probably plan to get vaccinated. Intent to get vaccinated remains higher among those ages 65 or older, and that should be 100%. If you're an old person, you should definitely want to get vaccinated. People with lower income levels continue to be less inclined than those with higher incomes to get vaccinated. A dynamic that is born out in the shares who say they've already received the vaccine. 14% of lower income adults say they have gotten at least one dose, compared to 20% of middle income and 27% of upper income adults. And though correlation does not lead to causation, I'd like to point out that more likely than not, those with lower income also are lower education. Right? Information is key here. If you are lower education, you are less likely to have access or less likely to be inclined to seek out information. So their default is going to remain their default. A smaller majority of women, 66% than men, 72%, intend to get a vaccine or already received one. Among those not planning to get vaccinated, women more likely than men to cite concerns about rapid pace of vaccine development and a lack of information about how well they will work as major reasons. Partisan differences, which has long characterized views about the outbreak, are increasingly seen in vaccine intent. Democrats are now 27 percentage points more likely than Republicans to say they plan to get or have already received coronavirus vaccine, 83 to 56%. This gap is wider than those seen at multiple points in 2020. It is unfortunate, but it is something that we've seen from the beginning. This virus has always been politicized. It has always been political capital at the core of it all. And at the end of the day, they're playing with people's lives. They always have been. From the stimulus bill to allowing, mass gatherings and protests in one instance and not in another. The fact remains is that public health crisis. If we're not supposed to gather in groups, it doesn't matter how noble your cause is. Find another way to do that doesn't put people at risk. And then it doesn't put people in a position of power to have to set a double standard. But I digress. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like what I'm doing. And please be well to yourself and to each other.